Last time, we began section 2, entitled Solar Fire, the Fire of Mind, which at over 1,000 pages makes up the bulk of a treatise on cosmic fire. After reading through the 9 introductory questions that DK will be considering in depth, we learned that the soul consciousness and the fire of mind form the, quote, basis of all that is now seen and known, both objectively and subjectively. DK then lists 3 categories that sum up the subjective matter we'll be studying for the foreseeable future, which are the science of objectivity, the manifestation of the sun through the sun and its attendant spheres, or the solar system in its entirety, and C, the evolutionary development of consciousness in time and space, therefore the evolution of spirit and matter. Next, we began a study of Chart 4, entitled Chart of the Pleroma by Valentinus, apparently created by HPB and appearing in volume 13 of her collected works, along with this explanatory text. So let's do a quick review of the points we have covered so far before continuing. The chart symbolizes the descent of spirit into manifestation, according to the Gnostics, with added info coming from HPB. The classical Gnostic material, which is from the, around the time of the Christ, both before and after, that classic information talks about the syzygies, which are these pairs of influences. They're yin-yang-like influences, male-female counterparts, where each new impression came forth. HPB in this setup adds her own series of syzygies. For instance, there's the 5-pointed star that you see. She hypothesizes that it represents 10 additional syzygies, which is not part of the original Gnostic teaching. But, since HPB had the ear of her masters, I'm sure that there is real truth to her extension of the old Gnostic teaching. Okay, so the Gnostics believe that the universe came into form through a series of syzygies, which are male and female, which they called eons, paired eons, by which divine essence flows into creation, with each syzygy producing new emanations that populate the pleroma, this is a chart of the pleroma, which is the realm of fullness and pure light. Yes, Nisa?
I was just, the pairs of opposites, like in the zodiac, in charts and everything, like we've been studying.
Yeah.
Are those linked in as well, automatically, the pairs of opposites as?
They're not the same. The early syzygies are more numinal. They're more causal than the constellations. But you can look at each of the 6 axes as acting like syzygies. They're not the classic Gnostic syzygies, but in terms of, like, if you look at the definition of what a syzygy does, one informs and the other forms the body of, then you'll see, in other words, it's like the spirit and matter aspect within each syzygy. But from starting at very high levels, so where that the matter aspect is completely subjective, but it's an informing principle, and the form that the informing principle occupies. That's what the syzygies are, and you can see those kind of parallels in the 6 axes of the zodiac, though not necessarily like one sign of the zodiac will be the form aspect and the other the spirit. They will be interactive in both ways. You really have to look at them at a on a per each kind of a basis. Yeah. Okay. Let's see where I was at. So next up. So let's start. We have first we have the point, the monad called Bethus, the deep, the unknown, and the unknowable Father. This is the monad that marks the emergence from the absolute. It's the very first informing of manifestation at a universal level, right? Though I think you could make a case for applying this pleroma, this chart, to at a solar systemic level, for instance, in which case this level, the monad, would have to do with the central spiritual sun, so you could do it that way as well. In other words, it's a system of descent that can be applied in many different ways. But it's important to realize this is not the human monad that's being described here, but rather the ultimate universal monad. Bethus, which is the name of this, means depth. Both monad and Bethus signify utter unity and the unknowable root of all. It is pure, unmanifested potential, and as such is the source of the first logos, the seed of all differentiation, the ground of all being in the manifested universe, what HPB calls the hidden Father. Bethus actually has a syzygy that's not mentioned in the text called Sige, which is the feminine aspect of the unknowable Father. And it would be, of course, the unknowable Mother, or the pure potential of the form aspect, unmanifested potential of the what eventually would become the material world. So then we have the triangle, Bethus, and the first emanated pair or duet. Bethus being part of this triangle. The duad is made up of nous, or mind, and its syzygy, aletheia, truth. You have to remember, this isn't exactly in accordance with theosophical thought, though it's pretty easy to link them up, to draw parallels between the two. But it's a completely separately evolved form. This upper triangle is made up of monad, or upper point, in the first duad, called in Gnosticism the first eonic pair, or aeonic pair, represented by the 2 lower points of the triangle. Bethos, the upper point, actually coexists with its feminine consort Sige, which is a word meaning silence. And when he, quote unquote, deposits the seed of emanation in her, she brings forth nous, mind, and aletheia, which is receptive, truth-bearing energy. In Valentinus's cosmology, nous is the archetypal mind of God. right? So you have a parallel there in theosophy with the cosmic mental plane. The logos before incarnation. It is through nous that and as Aunt Veronica pointed out last time, all of these are Greek words and Greek concepts as well. It is through nous that the rest of the eons, which are these energetic fields that come in pairs called syzygies, are generated in ordered pairs, each reflecting aspects of the divine nature. Aletheia, the feminine aspect of this first syzygy, embodied divine revelation and thus reveals the hidden reality. Where nous structures the pleroma by thought, Aletheia illumines that structure with quote unquote truth, rendering the archetypal ideas transparent and accessible. And here's the important part, accessible to later eons. The descent happens through the feminine aspect. If there was just nous, the mind would have no way to descend into the lower eons, which ultimately descends all the way to the human soul. So the union of this first pair symbolizes the first stirrings of divine consciousness. Next, in the square, the dual duad, tetractys or quaternary, two males, the logos, word, and anthropos, man. But we're talking about the grand heavenly man, not the fourth kingdom in nature. Plus two females, plus two females, sorry. Their syzygies, Zoe, which means life, and ecclesia, the church or assembly, which I think really means the Sangha, right? So we have two pairs of syzygies, one male, the other female. The male syzygy is represented by the vertical sides of the square. But within the framework of this, you could say, potential noumenal creative reality, in other words, the Brahma aspect, right? It's downward oriented at this point. The half of the male syzygy called logos is the active formative principle of the divine mind. It is the speech by which the hidden Father's thought takes shape, issuing the cosmic blueprint that orders all subsequent eons, okay? So you could say it's in theosophy, that would be the word and its highest form. You know, in fact, it would be what's called by DK the sound, right, from which the word emanates. That would be this level, right? In Gnostic thought, this eon articulates the archetypal patterns that underlie every form, from galaxies down to human souls. You could call it the great plan of God, the plan of deity. The anthropos half of the male syzygy, also called primordial man, represents the cosmic image or imprint of divinity, a living matrix in which the logoic blueprint is reflected as the potential for personal consciousness. In Gnosticism, anthropos is the first mirror of the Father's fullness in anthropomorphic terms, the template that will later unfold into the human kingdom soul and spirit. It sets the whole pattern in motion, but it is in no way yet materialized. Together, this syzygy weaves form, the logos, and image, anthropos, into the quaternary structure, thus stabilizing the pleroma's inner architecture. ensuring that divine thought, logos, which started through nous above it, has a living human-like reflection, anthropos, through which later eons or divine ideal beings can manifest. And this takes us up to where we left off last time. I wanted to do a full recount because it puts us right in the middle of this chart. We need this basis of understanding as we move on. So the next pair, the female syzygies, represented by the horizontal sides of the square, are called Zoe, the vivifying principle, and Ecclesia, representing the Sangha. Zoe injects all emanations with the spark of living energy, turning static ideas into dynamic realities. As the daughter Eon of Sophia, she safeguards the divine life stream and ensures that no emanation remains sterile or inert. Ecclesia, whose energy is that of group assembly or a sangha, is the organizing field that unites the disparate eons into a coherent, interrelated whole. Together, this pair represents life in community, the first living assembly or sangha in the divine realm. It would be like the higher numinal levels of hierarchical work. I think you could actually take it up to shambolic levels. Through their union, the eons move from isolated hierarchs or groupings into a single pulsating organism. For the Gnostic seeker, meditating on Zoe awakens the inner spark, whereas reflecting on Ecclesia draws that spark into the greater communion of souls. Their synergy points the way back to the hidden Father by showing that true life is always shared life. So basically, when in meditation, you can take any one of these pairs of opposites, and it shows the upward way to the next more numinal pair. These two syzygies, male and female, which together form the quaternary, are deeply interrelated and interactive. Logos and Anthropos laid down the blueprint of form and image. Zoe and Ecclesia vivify and collectivize them. Together, the four uphold the structure of the pleroma as potential for the next stage of manifestation. Any thoughts or questions so far about this? Yes, Barbara.
I'm wondering what the source of Zoe's energy is, the spark. Is it directly from the one, or is it from something like Foha from the Logos?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I think at the level of the quaternary, you're looking at the higher Fohatic, you could call them the higher Fohatic brothers. You know, that, in other words, the working out of intelligent electricity on the highest subplanes of the cosmic physical plane. I think that's the level we're talking about here at this divine quaternary. You know, what it has in common with the cosmic physical plane is the number 4, because you have 4 ethers of the cosmic physical, and I think you could make a direct relationship. I haven't pondered this idea, you know, to draw parallels between, for instance, these pair of males and pair of females and those 4 subplanes, but I think it's safe to say that's the level of consciousness we're talking about, and that's where Fohat begins informing the material aspect with spirit, right? So those informed beings would be represented by these pairs of syzygies, with the informing or spirit principle represented by the male logo, the male syzygies, and the feminine representing those highest of forms in our cosmic physical world. And you're right in that the Fohatic principle would be what brings those two into union. In other words, what makes it a cohesive, higher quaternary, right? Does that answer your question? Or did you have another thought about that?
Great.
Say again?
Yes, thank you so much. That's a great explanation.
Okay, good. All right. All right, next, 7 in all. So it's been 3, then the 4, and now we have the composite, 7 in all. The 7 are the 3 in the upper triangle and the 4 at the square. But as a cohesive unit, right? Next, the triangle, this describes the 7. The triangle, the potentiality of spirit. The square, the potentiality of matter. The vertical straight line, the potency of spirit. So we shifted from potentiality to potency. And the horizontal, the potency of matter. Okay. Key here is the word potential. Actually the shift from potential to potency. The triangle and square provide the archetypal scaffolding of the pleroma. The triangle expresses the potential of spirit, the square, the potential of matter. But within the square, the spirit-matter paradigm is repeated, with the vertical sides representing spirit and the horizontal, the vivification of matter at a noumenal level. We're not anywhere near the lower quaternary yet, where substance actually comes into form as we know it. This is all at a potential level. Next comes the pentagram, the pentad, the mysterious symbol of the Manasaputras, or sons of wisdom, which together with their syzygies make 10, or the decad. So with this, we depart from traditional Gnosticism, but as I said before, since HPB was overshadowed by 6 masters, 5 masters and another great scholar, we can, I think, trust this extension, right, into there being 10 syzygies. The pentagram marks the first major injection of mind energy into the pleroma. So we're now down into the 5th subplane of the cosmic physical plane, whereas before we were up in the cosmic ethers. Whereas the square represents the macrocosmic framework, the pentagon introduces at a noumenal level microcosmic potential, right? Life, motion, and polarity, the dynamic interplay of forces by which the soul animates the personality. That is introduced through the energetic of these 10, of these 5 syzygies. This is why the pentagram is the glyph for the human being. I mean, this really is this idea of the Manasaputras and the 5th creative hierarchy. And even though we haven't explored it to any great extent, the idea of these 5 syzygies that that for those reasons, the pentagram is the glyph for a human being. From the divine perspective, it represents the dawning of individual consciousness within the divine mind. So it just depends on the perspective. So each of the pentagram's 5 points represents a syzygy in active conjunction with a corresponding inner point. As with all syzygies, we have a male logos, or quote unquote seed, paired with a female shakti, or womb, thus planting intention into substance. Though the pentagram syzygies weren't articulated by Valentinus, the idea of a pentagram of planetary influences was later developed in Hermetic tradition, using the 5 classical planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, in part because they represent the 5 elements through which all manifestation is formed. And again, you don't have an exact fit with a theosophical thought on these planets, but there are a lot of close interrelations between the 2 doctrines. In all 5 of these syzygies, the pattern is the same, with the logos representing the seed idea and the shakti, the receptive form. Their interplay turns blueprint into living reality. Okay. For example, the syzygy of Mercury is made up of the logos of Mercury. This is HPB's speculation on the and extension of these ideas of syzygies that were created by the Gnostics, right? So in her thought, so the syzygy of Mercury made up of the logos of Mercury, which is the cosmic communicator, representing archetypal mind and carrying the blueprint of thought, and the corresponding receptive matrix, the feminine aspect of Mercury, which is the intuitive vessel that holds, reflects, and nurtures those seed thoughts. Together, they represent pure mind, made knowable and meaningful. So the pure mind part would be the male aspect of the syzygy, and the made knowable and meaningful would come through the feminine aspect. And this way, it's very much like Kokma and Bina, of the Kether, Kokma, and Bina triad at the top of the tree of life, where the one is pure thought, and the other is, you could say it's the wisdom aspect as reflected down from Kether, whereas the Bina is the knowledge translating that wisdom into the knowable and meaningful, cognizable aspects of mentality. But again, we have to acknowledge the fact that the idea of 5 pentagrammic syzygies was not developed by the Gnostics, but rather by HPB and the masters who overshadowed her writings. And you could see here that we could explore each of these. If you like, you can pick up the recording of this and go back and ponder these ideas of the 5 syzygies and their feminine matrix. But since HPB doesn't do that in her text accompanying this particular chart, we won't go that deep. Next and last of all, the hexalpha, or interlaced triangles, the hexad, which with their syzygies make 12, or the dodecad. Again, this is HPB's extension. Hexalpa or hexalpha, I prefer the latter, just means six-pointed star. The upward triangle symbolizes the triadal impulse of spirit. The downward is its counterpart in matter. Interlaced, they show spirit and matter interpenetrating to yield 6 distinct focal points. Spirit, having descended into matter, now begins its return journey through conscious transmutation. So unlike all of the syzygies that preceded this, this is an evolutionary series of 12 syzygies. The other figures above it, all the purpose was to take the Godhead into matter. Now we have the return path indicated by the 6. And, if you're going to really have a pleroma, meaning the fullness or totality, you have to include this idea. Whereas the pentagram activates the soul within the personality, the hexalpha integrates the soul with the cosmos. It is the geometry of the Christic body, the alchemical marriage, and the seal of Solomon, a perfected vessel of divine light. So we have the point, which represents pure being, undifferentiated source, divine potential. The triangle, the first emanation, which introduces the idea of polarity and relation and archetypal tension. And then we have the square, which crystallizes that higher divine noumenal impulse into static form, but still potential form. And it has the function of containment of the archetype, hence the square. Then we have the pentagram, activation through syzygy, which creates a creative polarity and generation of life in the lower quaternary. And finally, the hexalpha, integration and ascent, important aspect. Union of opposites, eventual union of opposites, and spiritual synthesis. So that's it in a nutshell. Any thoughts or questions about so far? Do we have anything in the chat here? Let me look.
Yeah, and Veronica said hex alpha is the 6-pointed star, but it also means 6 letters of A.
Oh, really? Huh. That's interesting. 6 letters of A. Alpha is the letter A, yeah. Yeah, well, what I get from that is that you're still looking at the, A represents in theosophical thought, like in the AUM, A is the spirit aspect, U is the soul aspect, and M is the matter aspect. So you could say that the hexalpha articulates spirit in form, but they're the 6 articulations of the spirit aspect in form. Because even at this level, we're not in dense physical form at all yet. These are the energies, the hexalpha represents the energies that make possible integration and ascension, right? And make possible the union of opposites, starting with personality and soul, and eventual spiritual synthesis, which is synthesis with the monad. That's the matrix for that potential, right? It's not in any way the lower quaternary. Okay, anybody else? Any thoughts about this? You could see the close relation here between this. I mean, for it to find its way into a treatise on cosmic fire, Bailey/DK must have felt that there was a close analogy between, these this Gnostics, the idea of Gnostic syzygies and theosophy. Okay, next. Such are the contents of the pleroma, or completion. The ideas in the divine mind, 28 in all. For the Bithus, or the Father, is not reckoned, as it is the root of all. You often find this, that the point in the center is not included. Like, for instance, the 6-pointed star, or even the 5-pointed star. You just count the outer points. You don't count the point in the center as part of the energetic of the emanation, right? It's the hidden source of the emanation, but it's not to be included in the and that which emanates that essential causal level. So here's a breakdown. Duad, representing the triangle, 2 eons. Quaternary, 2 males and 2 females, 4 eons. Pentad, 5 males and 5 females, 10 eons. Hexalpha, 6 males and 6 females, 12 eons, totaling 28 emanating eons, 28 emanating eons in all. 28 is a particularly important number in the blue books. For example, in Dyna 1, DK says, I would add that the 28 belong to the 7. And when the disciple works with 7, he normally and automatically releases the 28, working under the impression of the 7-ray qualities. So just notice how incredibly subjective this statement is. In other words, he doesn't say, the 28 and they give us a subject, or the 7 and give us a subject. He's talking purely in the energetics of the numbers themselves. This is pure numerology. Okay, finally, the 2 small circles within the pleroma are the syzygy Christos Pneuma, or Christ, and the Holy Spirit. These are after emanations, and as such, from one aspect, typify the descent of spirit to inform and evolve matter, which essentially proceeds from the same source. And from another, the descent or incarnation of the Kumaras, or the higher egos of humanity. So, unlike the syzygies of the pentagram and the hexalpha, which are theosophical extensions of the Gnostic teachings, the Christos Pneuma syzygy actually had its roots in Gnosticism. In fact, Valentinus himself names Christos, which he calls the anointed logos, and Pneuma, the world spirit, as the last after emanations of the pleroma. It seems to me that they work hand in hand with the hexalpha, the 6-pointed star, because both, you could say, one is the means by which the ascending path becomes available, and the other is that towards which one is ascending. So these are after emanations of the pleroma, because only the Christos Pneuma syzygy can cross the threshold from pure mind into the living substance where evolution actually takes place, thereby animating the 28 ideas established by the first 14 syzygies. Christos without Pneuma would be like a ray of light shining into empty space. Pneuma without Christos would be blind substance, even though substance of a very high level, unillumined and inert. For every true spiritual descent needs both the word and the breath. So the Christos Pneuma syzygy is the living heart of the pleroma's blueprint, the final couple who not only bridge spirit and matter, but in true syzygy fashion, bring divine ideas down into incarnate evolution, both cosmically, resulting in the world soul, and personally, resulting in human evolution. Christos Pneuma mirror the first syzygy, Bethos Sige, which is why this chart visually connects these two syzygies. Bethos and Sige, or CJ, are pure source and silence. Christos and Pneuma are the word made active through the breath that carries it into form. Christos is the illuminating ray that awakens all lower kingdoms into consciousness, that lights up the causal and mental levels. And that way it works closely with the pentagram and with the Manasaputras. Pneuma is the responsive world soul, right? Who enfolds that light in substance, weaving it through the lower mental, emotional, and physical layers of the cosmos. Without Pneuma, it would never descend or find its way into the lower quaternary. Okay, the small circle, triangle and square dangling under the main body of the pleroma suggests it's, HPB doesn't discuss it at all, but to me it suggests physical incarnation, a post-pleroma downward extension into the dense world of form, with the circle representing the ring past knot of outer manifestation, you could say, in that case, the lower quaternary, the triangle, Atma Buddhi Manas, and the square, the lower quaternary. So this really drives home the ideas that the pleroma is purely noumenal, causal, series of 28 syzygies that then inform the lower quaternary. Thoughts or questions on any part of the commentary on this illustration? It's unique, we won't find anything else like this in TCF. It's hardcore HPB in her work to illumine the Gnostic literature. Right? Okay, then. Yes, Barbara.
In some of the Gnostic literature, there is an archetypal creator who in some way desecrates matter.
Oh, yeah, all right.
And I don't see any place for that archetype in this system.
Yeah, we studied this in, let's see, when it was in a Secret Doctrine, a series of 2 or 3 Secret Doctrine webinars a while back, where she steps into Gnosticism pretty thoroughly. And what my memory is that these are the lower creators who had lost their connection with their source. In that way, there's a connection with who was the great heroine of the Sophia? Yeah, the Sophia. It's like the male counterpart. Gosh, I almost remember. It starts with a K. K-R. Carabantos or something like that. And it's a completely, the closest really in theosophical terms would be Jehovah, the idea that it's a complete material creator, disconnected from its higher source. And it's really a unique aspect of Gnostic doctrine, this in-between space, I'm trying to think of any theosophical parallel, and the only thing I could think of are these what are called chahayas, who are these beings who projected the early root races from their own form aspect into denser form. They were literally mirrored themselves into denser form. And they were uninformed by spirit. It was a pure, the whole phase of the early root races is oriented towards building a suitable form for a much later overshadowing by spirit. So Carabtanos or something like that. Anyway, I think that would be the closest parallel. And there's no regard for, the ensouling, the quality of ensouling. But they did prepare, going to the Theosophical Chahayas, did prepare the form for eventual overshadowing by the solar angels or Manasaputras in the middle of the third root race of the fourth globe, right? So I haven't done a deep enough study of Gnosticism to try to, to really find a more exact parallel, but just off the top, that's what I can come up with. Anybody else? Okay, well, yes, Joe.
I do this with trepidation, but thank you so much for this explanation. And I'll put it simply in the way I think. When I first began studying with Dwacol and Alice Bailey, I remember that I was writing a paper and I remember that Frank Sinatra used to sing a song, love and marriage go together like a horse and carriage. You can't have one without the other.
Right.
And I see this, I hear it through all that we're being described to. You can't, it's almost as if one could say there is a Buddha and there is a Christ. There is the hard ray, there is the soft ray.
Yeah.
You can't have one without the other. And then all, you see, that's my way of bringing it from way the heck and gone up there where I don't really understand, all the way down to where I live.
Mm. Yeah, I think you could say that love and marriage are one of the original pairs of syzygies. You would be looking at a feminine pair of the quaternary syzygies. If we go back. I have to go way back. I always do this. Go way there. Yeah. So I would say, here you have love in Zoe and marriage in Ecclesia. So yeah, I think Frank Sinatra was probably an illumined master, and he got this directly from hierarchical sources.
The wonderful part for me is that it all comes together in synthesis.
Isn't it amazing how, how these archetypes really find their way into all aspects of our life, even pop songs, and it's the fabric of our existence, it's not some removed theory, that belongs only in a dusty book on your shelf. It really is it's the very nature of duality, really. It articulates all these qualities of duality, this series of syzygies that make up the pleroma. Thank you, Joe. Anyone else? Okay, well, we're really turning the page here. Okay. Next up, a deeper dive into the 9 introductory questions posed at the beginning of this section. So could we get a reader for the first question? Or his commentary, DK's commentary on the first question.
And Veronica, you want to read?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. 1. What is the relationship of the sun, SON, to the sun, SUN? This question brings us primarily to a consideration as to who is the SON, sun, and what is his function. 2 factors are universally recognized in all systems that merit the name of philosophy. They are the 2 factors of spirit and matter, of Purusha and Prakriti. There is at times a tendency to confound such terms as life and form, consciousness and the vehicle of consciousness with the terms spirit and matter. They are related, but clarity of view will be facilitated if it were realized that prior to manifestation or to the birth of a solar system, it is more correct to utilize the words spirit and matter. When these 2 are interrelated during manifestation and after the cessation of the pralaic interval or interlude between 2 systems, then the terms life and form, consciousness and its vehicle, and more correct for during the period of abstraction, consciousness is not form, form is not, and sorry, I'm not reading this well.
Sorry, I was muted. Consciousness is not, form is not.
Consciousness is not, form is not, and life demonstrating as an actual principle is not. Sorry for that.
It's oddly worded, so not a problem. Okay, so first, we state our question. What is the relationship of the SON, sun, to the SUN, sun? This question brings us primarily to a consideration as to who is the sun, SON, and what is his function. 2 factors are universally recognized in all systems that merit the name of philosophy. They are the 2 factors of spirit and matter, of Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha being the spirit aspect in Hinduism, Prakriti, the matter aspect. Purusha corresponds to the SON, sun, who is timeless, unchanging consciousness. Prakriti, or matter, corresponds to the SUN, sun, the mutable field of substance in which consciousness unfolds. Their interaction. Now think how, well, I won't say it yet. Their interaction is the basis for all cosmic evolution. It's the interaction that makes the evolution happen. For spirit must have a vehicle, and matter must receive the animating spark. By the way, Purusha and Prakriti can be seen as a kind of ultimate syzygy, thus providing context for inclusion of the pleroma chart at this point in the text, right? So many of the descriptions of the syzygies can be brought to mind as we explore this relationship between the SON, sun, who would be the male syzygy, and the SUN, sun, the female aspect of the syzygy. Okay. Next, there is at times a tendency to confound such terms as life and form, consciousness and the vehicle of consciousness with the terms spirit and matter. They are related, but clarity of view would be facilitated if it were realized that prior to manifestation or to the birth of a solar system, it is more correct to utilize the word spirit and matter. So before a solar system manifests, the pre-space and time primordial polarity is spirit and matter. That would also describe the higher syzygies, like Bethos and Sige. Spirit is the unconditioned transcendent aspect that yields the impulse to manifest, whereas matter is the latent, undifferentiated substance awaiting that impulse. Their interplay occurs prior to and underlies every subsequent differentiation. Life and form, on the other hand, describe the dynamic relationship after a system is manifest. Life refers to the animating principle active within the forms. Form denotes the shaped structure, visible or invisible, that life inhabits. And finally, when these two are interrelated during a manifestation and after the cessation of the pralaic interval or interlude between two systems, then the terms life and form, consciousness and its vehicles are more correct. For during the period of abstraction, consciousness is not, form is not, and life demonstrating as an actual principle is not. So that last sentence is particularly important. There's, when it's in its primordial state, it's not demonstrating as a principle. So as here used, the terms pralaya is the pause between two solar systems, a state of abstraction when all manifest phenomena have dissolved. During this period, the seeds of the next cycle lie dormant. Matter exists only as undifferentiated substance, spirit only as unexpressed potential. Then when a new solar system begins to unfold, spirit as the animating principle penetrates matter once again, the receptive field. This interplay births life as an actual principle, right? For life now lives within the form. Simultaneously, consciousness acquires its myriads of vehicles and layers of subtle bodies emerge to carry this awareness. Okay, any thoughts or questions about this? Nadel.
So if I'm getting this correctly, essentially spirit and matter, they're one and the same. And during pralaya, they are literally one and the same. They're not different. And when they descend into manifestation, there's a duality, but still it's all one that's evolving. So it's essentially spirit and matter as a whole that is evolving, if I'm understanding that correctly.
Well, to gain the level of unity, you have to go all the way back up here to Bethus, the point at the top, which is usually, by the way, shown in the center of a circle, like the symbol for the solar logos, for instance, you have the point in the center of the circle. That's the usual way. This is just a different way of illustrating because there's such a complicated series of ideas being described that they used a different format for the symbol. But yeah, if you have to go to before the absolute projects itself into manifestation in order to unify Purusha and Prakriti. Now, in Pralaya, they are, well, in the final pralaya, where the solar system, where all the universe is dissolved into pralaya, that final pralaya, then they do re-become one. But in intermediate pralayas, such as, say, the pralaya between two globes or two chains, they are held in situ. They're inactive and participate or are being bathed in, both being bathed in pure spirit, in order that they may once again re-emerge on a higher octave of the spiral to represent spirit and matter in the next cycle, which would be inherently more evolved. You see? So it's a subtle difference from what you said. The only time that you get the true union is at a universal pralaya, but in all the intermediate pralayas, these two qualities are held in situ. Okay, anyone else? Okay, next. Wait a minute. I got lost. Yeah, we did that one. All right. So next one, these two, make sure I didn't do this one. Yeah, we did this one too. Right. Okay, so next up, can we get a reader, please?
Yeah, Barbara, you want to read?
Yes, there is spirit substance, but in the state of quiescence, of utter neutrality, of negativity, and of positivity. In manifestation, the two are approximated. They
Sorry, Barbara, that's passivity.
Oh, sorry.
It changes the meaning. That's why I pointed it out.
Of negativity and of passivity in manifestation, the two are approximated. They interact upon each other. Activity supersedes quiescence. Positivity replaces negativity. Movement is seen in place of passivity, and the two primordial factors are no longer neutral to each other, but attract and repulse, interact and utilize. Then and only then can we have form animated by life and consciousness demonstrated through appropriate vehicles. How can this be expressed? In terms of fire, when the two electric poles are brought into definite relationship, we have demonstrated along the line of occult sight and of occult feeling, both heat and light. The relationship is brought about and perfected during the evolutionary process. This heat and light are produced by the union of the two poles or by the occult marriage of male and female, of spirit, father, and matter, mother. In terms of the physical, this union produces the objective solar system, the son of the father, and the mother.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, so getting back to Nadel's question, what happens in pralaya is a neutrality is established between the two phases rather than a complete union of spirit and matter. What happens is they become unpolarized to each other, right? During pralaic periods. Okay, so first there is spirit substance, but in a state of quiescence, of utter neutrality, of negativity, and of passivity. In manifestation, the two are approximated. They interact upon each other. Activity supersedes quiescence. Positivity replaces negativity. Movement is seen in place of passivity, and the two primordial factors are no longer neutral to each other, but attract and repulse, interact and utilize. So during pralaya, spirit substance exists, but it lies in absolute quiescence, utterly neutral, negative, and passive. In manifestation, these two primordial factors, spirit and substance, engage. Activity replaces stillness, positivity supplants negativity, movement takes the place of passivity, and no longer neutral to one another. The two aspects attract and repel, interact, and mutually utilize each other. Pretty clear, I think. Any thoughts or questions? Okay. Notice how he really starts at a cosmic level here. This passage can be applied to the whole universe, or to any divisions within that universe, right? For the pralaya, you have utter neutrality, and during the beginning of a new cycle, wherever and whatever it might be, you have this interactivity. Okay, next. Then and only then can we have form animated by life and consciousness demonstrated through appropriate vehicles. How can this be expressed? In terms of fire, when the two electric poles are brought into definite relationship, we have demonstrated along the line of occult sight and of occult feeling, both heat and light. Okay. DK here describes a transition into manifestation. Only when the polar forces of spirit and matter come into active relationship does life inhabit and enliven form, and consciousness began to use the form aspect as vehicles for development. I mean, why is he describing this here? Because this is the point, the birth of the sun, right? The SON sun, to which then inhabits the SUN sun. It's at this point that this comes into being, at whatever level. Considered in terms of fire, spirit, which has heretofore been neutral, becomes the positive pole, and matter the negative. Their interaction generates heat, which DK calls occult feeling, meaning the felt energy of life, felt by the indwelling jiva, right? Who is expressing consciousness. You could say that consciousness is developed in accordance with how much of this felt energy, of which DK calls heat, is experienced, right? And light, the illuminating power of consciousness, which DK here calls occult sight. So every time he says heat, every time he says light, you have to take it out of the physical plane descriptive level and realize that heat means, in every case, the ability to feel the life aspect, right? And light, the nature of consciousness itself, the illuminating power of consciousness, okay? You just have to translate those two words. Next, or finally, this relationship is brought about and perfected during the evolutionary process. This heat and light are produced by the union of the two poles, or by the occult marriage of male and female, of spirit, father, and matter, mother. In terms of the physical, this union produces the objective solar system. Up until this sentence, you could apply this at every level. And now he's getting down to the subject at hand, which is the difference between the SON and the SUN. The objective solar system, the son of the father and of the mother. So the cosmic marriage of spirit and matter produce the sun, which gradually matures through a refining of the dual energies of heat, meaning a growth of the ability to feel the energy of the life aspect, and light, meaning growth of the illuminating power of consciousness. In physical terms, union of spirit and matter births the objective solar system. The SON, son, born of father or spirit and mother or the matter aspect, produces the vehicle, the SUN. Okay, next up, could we get a reader, please?
Carol, you want to read?
Say the name again.
Carol.
Oh, Carol, yeah.
I hadn't heard it for sure. Okay, in terms of the subjective, it produces the sun as the sum total of the qualities of light and heat. In terms of fire, by the union or at one-ment of electric fire, spirit, and fire by friction, energized matter, solar fire is produced. This solar fire will be distinguished above all else by its evolutionary development and by the gradual intensification of the heat to be felt and of the light to be seen. For a clearer comprehension of this abstract matter, we might consider the microcosm or man evolving in the three worlds. Man is the product of the approximation, at present imperfect, of the two poles of spirit, the Father in heaven, and of matter, the mother. The result of this union is an individualized Son of God, or unit of the divine self, an exact replica, in miniature, of the lowest plane of the great Son of God, the all-self, who is in himself the totality of all the miniature sons and of all the individualized selves and of each and every unit.
Thank you, Carol. First, in terms of the subjective, it produces the SUN, sun, as the sum total of the qualities of light and heat. In terms of fire, by the union or at one-ment of electric fire, spirit, and fire by friction, energized matter, solar fire is produced. Okay, so this is a terrific definition of solar fire. Okay, so there's actually quite a lot in these few words. First, the term subjective points to the unseen archetypal aspect of the sun, the reservoir of pure light or consciousness and heat, which is the life force. This inner sun exists as the collective potency of these two energies before any physical sun appears. Electric fire is cosmic spirit, pure transcendent energy. Fire by friction is the active life force generated when matter becomes charged and vibratory. Their fusion creates solar fire, which embodies both consciousness and the vitality of the life aspect. Next, this solar fire will be distinguished above all else by its evolutionary development and by the gradual intensification of the heat to be felt and of the light to be seen. So solar fire is not a static condition, but rather a living flame that grows more potent during the evolutionary period, gradually heightening both the inner warmth we feel, which comes through contact with the life aspect, and the clarity of light we perceive, clarity being an indicator of our growth in consciousness. We'll consider the rest of this passage all at once. For a clearer comprehension of this abstract matter, we might consider the microcosm, or man evolving in the three worlds. Man is the product of the approximation, at present imperfect, of the two poles of spirit, the Father in heaven, and of matter, the Mother. The result of this union is an individualized Son of God. The just real key word is the individualized aspect here, or unit of the divine self. Unit of the divine self, unit and individualized being synonymous. An exact replica in miniature on the lowest plane of the great Son of God, the all-self, who is in himself the totality of all the miniature sons, of all the individualized selves, and of each and every unit. Nisa.
I just wanted to say, it's sentences like this last bit that makes me think that Ernest Holmes, who wrote The Science of Mind, which is like the text for religious science, that he had to, because individualization, that each person is an individualization, is like the a basic thing in religious science. It's all God. He doesn't say hylozoism,
Right.
but it's like plastered at the very foundation of everything. And God forbid that he would have, and he mentions Annie Besant. I just really think that he was, though people in the movement tend to not own it,
Right.
I really think this is a lot of source for him.
Yeah, and it could have come without ever having read any of this because, if you're able to contact your intuition, you're going to be, especially as someone who is, an exemplar of a whole doctrine, then you're gonna translate it in accordance with your own ray types, right? And so the doctrines become they vary from each other, but they have core similarities, and you're pointing out one of those core similarities, right?
Well, I would think so, except I can't even remember where I read but he says, references Anna, he calls her Anna Besant. So I really think they all knew one
And,
another, and back in the turn of the century, around the
uh,
1900s. I think they were all
they were thick as
speaking.
thieves. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, there's a lot of inner commerce between them. I noticed that some of the esoteric artists, uh, the female artists of the early part of the last century, that some of them knew, like uh, Captain, Olga Froebe Captain, knew Alice Bailey, and there are pictures of them together. And then when you look at her paintings, you realize that they're visual counterparts of Bailey's teachings. So yeah, okay. So this is the ultimate as above, so below statement. In this section, TK continues to develop how the poles of spirit and matter interact. So each microcosmic or human son, birthed by means of a father-mother union, mirrors the cosmic process by which spirit and matter unite to produce a universal son. DK here emphasizes the consistent outcome of the spirit-matter interaction across all planes of existence, resulting in the emergence of the Son, a conscious individual unit of divinity. In the human context, this results in an exact microcosmic replica of the all-self. Again, I'm thinking of this pleroma. the idea of the lower syzygies being direct mirrors of the higher ones, right? Pointing to a fractal-like reality in which every soul contains the full archetypal pattern of the whole, each one a complete spiritual blueprint, holographically encoded within every part. Any thoughts, questions? Okay. Okay, so that was on this. So we need a reader, please.
Janet.
The microcosm expressed in other terms, or from the subjective point of view, is a miniature sun, distinguished by the qualities of heat and light. At present, that light is under the bushel, or deeply hidden by a veil of matter. But in due process of evolution, it will shine forth to such an extent that the veils will be lost from sight in a blaze of exceeding glory. At the present, the microcosmic heat is of a small degree, or the magnetic radiation between the microcosmic units is but little felt in occult significance of the term. But as time proceeds, the emanation of heat, due to the intensification of the inner flame, coupled with the assimilated radiation of other units, will increase and become of such proportions that the interaction between the individualized cells will result in the merging to perfection of the flame within each one, and a blending of the heat. This will proceed until there is one flame with countless sparks within it, until the heat is general and balanced. Kind of sounds like now.
Oh, well, good. There's,
I wish.
all degrees of this exist simultaneously, because they're units of consciousness, throughout the solar system that are at all stages of what he's describing here. So first of all, the microcosm, expressed in other terms or from the subjective point of view, is a miniature sun, distinguished by the qualities of heat and light. So what does he mean by heat and light? These are code words, right? Heat is always the felt response to the life aspect. And what's light? What does light represent? The consciousness aspect. The growing light is the growing consciousness aspect. At present, now, within that framework, the next sentence makes perfect sense. At present, the light is under the bushel, or deeply hidden by a veil of matter. But in due process of evolution, it will shine forth to such an extent that the veils will be lost from sight in a blaze of exceeding glory. So the human miniature sun is the monad that until the fourth initiation shines through the jewel in the heart of the egoic lotus, which unfolds in response to heat, awareness of the life aspect, and light, the resulting growth in consciousness. So they're interdependent, right? As one's heat develops, as it responds to the life aspect, consciousness, light, grows, right? The bushel under which we hide this light is the lower 18 subplanes of the cosmic physical plane, which act as veils, hiding the causal monadic sun on the higher mental plane. The glorious shining forth comes at the fourth initiation and increases at each successive initiation. Any thoughts or questions about this? Notice how he continuously is developing this theme of heat and light. That's what this whole section's all about. Yeah, Nadell.
Would you say that this point of the blazing forth through the veils would be the point at which the matter aspect has been redeemed, essentially? That
Yeah, this is a movable feast. You could say that every initiation, this what you described applies, but particularly at the fourth, where this causal body is shattered, where you really truly are released from the lower subplanes of matter, and you actually translate your being onto the Buddhic plane. Then you truly could say that the veils will be lost from sight in a blaze of exceeding glory. The veils being finally the causal body, right? Now, before that, the causal body is actually a positive pole of our process because it represents the soul form. And the veils are the veils of illusion, Maya, and glamour of the lower three sheaths, right? But when we reach this higher level, then the impediment becomes the causal body. And it's then that, and this is also blazing forth, is also a very kundalinic expression, when the fire burneth up the whole, that idea where the fire rises up to the kundalini and the whole system is transcended, and that happens at the time one translates onto the Buddhic plane at the fourth initiation. Okay. Next, at present, the microcosmic heat is of small degree, or the magnetic radiation between the microcosmic units is but little felt in the occult significance of the term. So the microcosmic heat is the heat of solar fire as it makes itself felt shining through the veils. As this solar fire intensifies, there will be a corresponding increase of magnetic radiation between the microcosmic units, signifying a growing group consciousness. This is the path across the axes from Leo to Aquarius, from the self-centered sun, right? I am, and the group-centered awareness, I am that. The phrase, but little felt in the occult significance of the term references the ability to feel and respond to the life aspect. Yeah. Okay. Next, but as time proceeds, the emanations of heat due to intensification of the inner flame, coupled with the assimilated radiation of other units, will increase and become of such proportions that the interaction between the individualized cells will result in the merging to perfection of the flame within each one and a blending of the heat. So the radiant subjective demonstration of fire increases as a result of group interplay. He's, in a sense, introducing a new further extension of the qualities of heat and light here. Thus, as each member of a group increases his or her spiritual heat and light, the group increases its own fiery expression, its own group-centered heat and light. Perfecting the flame means the full fusion of personality and soul, not just within the disciple, but across a group of awakened individuals. This is the foundation of true esoteric community, what in the syzygies are called Sangha, right? It's Aletheia, I think it was Aletheia that represented this. The energy of that promotes this level of growth, that promotes this level of consciousness, where each person's perfected spark contributes to a greater unified blaze, right? Not just an individual. We still have a tendency to think of initiation in terms of individuals. Well, he's a master of wisdom, but by that point, he's still completely group identified. He, she. That quote unquote master of wisdom is actually a great ashram of beings, right? And yet, at the same time, that being retains its individuality. A blending of the heat means that a felt response to the life aspect results from group interplay. That's the good news, and it's probably why there's such a focus on group initiation, as a result of that 1925 conclave, where there was a real push to make that a reality. And finally, this will proceed until there is one flame with countless sparks within it, until the heat is general and balanced. So as each person's inner flame intensifies and blends with others, all the sparks of individuality coexist within a single balancing flame, symbolizing perfected group soul consciousness. It's a great way of seeing a group in terms of fire, right? On a higher turn of the spiral, the one flame is the greater life from which the all the monads hang by the quote unquote, by the finest thread of Fohat, as countless undetached sparks. So that's literally like the higher octave of what he's describing here at a soul level, all right? So the point is to begin to identify with the flame instead of just with the spark. At first you identify with the spark. That's that point of light at the center, the jiva, which is implanted by the Manasaputras, and you respond to that spark, which emanates from the soul. You respond to the soul and you build that relation, but eventually you respond to the source of that spark, which is the flame, which always, in every case, represents a group of beings, right? A group of undetached sparks. Okay, well, that's going to do it for today. Any final thoughts or questions before we head out? All righty then. Yes, Nadell.
Just as an afterthought, it kind of allows you to sort of not freak out about what's going on in the world.
Oh, good. That's always useful. And that afterthought is?
That is the afterthought.
That this material, I say,
Yeah.
absolutely. What I find one of the most amazing things about DK is the perspective on the world we live in, that it gives you. You just realize this is a passing cycle. We're going through this time of intense repulsion and interactivity of the pairs of extremely polarized opposites, right? That will clear out the dross for the new age energy to flood in. And, the consciousnesses of those who incarnate in these subsequent decades will be naturally attuned, because they're choosing to reincarnate at that time, to these Aquarian energies. And we're seeing, you know, a gradual shift to the higher expression, provided we don't destroy the root race in the interim, you know, which is a distinct possibility, which, you know, I'm not just being sour grapes here. DK raises this possibility. He says, there's a distinct chance that humanity won't make it through the root race, which won't be particularly different news than every other root race. The Aquarian root race also failed. Also, the Lemurian root race failed. That's not something we read about as much, but so the last two root races failed. So maybe it's more the rule than the exception that root races don't make it all the way through their final sub races. You know, but that in itself is no end. You know, as we discovered with the recreation of humanity after the Atlantean root races, you know, the brothers of the white face repopulated the world in, you know, in a concentric ring, you could say, around old Atlantis, you know, especially around the Mediterranean and, you know, in central Mexico and somewhat up in England and the Norse lands. And it all started up again, but at a higher turn of the wheel, because the energy of Manas, you know, in this Aryan root race was very much focused on being the fifth root race, you know. So at the sixth root race, or the sixth subrace of this fifth root race, if we don't destroy ourselves, the higher mind energy will be introduced. And through that, a whole other level of response to the soul becomes possible, right? And the danger of self-destruction and succumbing to material and personality aspects will gradually be superseded by contact with the soul, right? Yeah, and that's, I think, also concurrent with the ending of the Kali Yuga, which is that completely separate age, you know, that's part of the Hindu mythology. Okay, let me look at the chats real. Okay, yeah, you bet. Okay, thank you all very much.